What's up, arty people? My name is Julie and welcome to my art channel. Today I have a very fun video for you guys. It's just some tips and tricks for beginner watercolors. I still consider myself a beginner in a lot of ways, so I hope that you enjoy these tips and will practice right along with me. So my very first tip for you guys is to always use multiple water containers. I like to use 3, but I see a lot of people use 2. One container is to rinse out the paint from your brush, and the other container is to re-wet your paintbrush so you can go into a new color. This helps keep your colors from getting muddied, which ultimately ends in a really nice looking painting. Okay, now let's go over the 3 basic watercolor techniques that we will use in this video. The first technique is the wet on wet technique. For this one, you want to wet your paper enough so that it's glossy, but not so much that there is water pooling anywhere. And then you want to load up your paintbrush with color and go straight into the wet paper. This technique is great for doing backgrounds or any sort of smooth blending, great for galaxies, roses that I'll show you at the end of the video, all that kind of good stuff. It's also a really fun way to see how watercolors and colors will interact with each other and just to watch the colors spread. So yeah, that's the wet on wet technique. The second technique is the wet on dry technique. For this one, you want to load up your brush with water and then with paint and go onto a dry surface. It's similar to a wet on wet technique, especially if you go back into it with more colors, but this one allows for smoother gradient shadings and just a bunch of different variations, basically. You can get harder edges with the wet on dry technique and all that kind of stuff. And then the third technique is the dry on dry, and that's where you wet your paintbrush a little and pick up the paint and then go into a dry paper. This kind of separates the paint a little bit when you go over the paper, and you can get some interesting textures, and not everything is so smooth and connected. It's a great way of doing like foliage or hair or just really anything. Great for backgrounds. It's really great for adding that extra texture to a painting. Alright, my next tip for you guys is to always practice your brush strokes. I like to paint flowers and loose leaves to practice, and it's a great way of like learning how to handle your brush, learning how to control your arm and your hand and how much pressure you're using. It's just a really good idea to practice. Practice. So what I'm going to do is a couple of loose florals and leaves, for example. To make my leaves, I pretty much have like one technique, and that's to go in the tip of the leaf, go light pressure, and then push harder on my brush to give kind of a medium pressure, and then pick it back up again. So I go light pressure, medium pressure, light pressure, light pressure, medium pressure, light pressure, and that way I get like a nice tapered effect at the tip of the leaf, and it gets nice and fat in the middle. The more pressure you put on your brush, the thicker the line is going to be. So when I do the petals, I always go in like a kind of a C shape, and then I allow the majority of the body of my brush to touch the paper. So I go light, and then I push down pretty hard, and then I pick it back up again, and that gives me the tapered edges and the fat middle body. Another way to use your brush is to pretty much use it full on flat. So you're like, if you hold the brush kind of parallel to the paper, and just do nice thick fat brush strokes. This is a good way of getting flat even washes or filling in lots of space in one go without constantly having to make a new line. And you just use the flat of your brush. So again, I'm gonna do my little leaves and flower petals. So I go light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure, light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. And then if you want nice thin lines, it's good to hold your brush a little bit higher up and just allow the tip of your brush to touch the paper, and then drag it across, and that'll get you some good thin lines. You can have a lot of different line variations and line widths with just one brush. I'm using a number 8 round, and you can see I can get some pretty thin details. So when I do my leaves, or like the stems of the leaves, I'll go really light, and then I'll go in with my light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure, and just drag out those nice, loose, organic feeling leaves. You can always go in and do things in a more structured way, but this is just how I like to work with loose feeling things. Yeah, loose feeling things. Let's get into these loose roses. We're only going to use two techniques, or two of the tips that we've gone over today. We're going to use the same type brush strokes that we have practiced, and we're going to be using a wet on dry technique. The way I start my roses is I start with 3 little dots in the very center, and this kind of acts like the very middle tightly packed petals. And then I go out using the soft pressure, heavy pressure, soft pressure in a slight C shape. And I start very small with very small petals, and then as we get away from the center of the rose, each petal gets bigger and bigger. And I'll apply more pressure to the brush to get the fatter looking petals. And with that, the roses are done, and I'm just going to plop in some little leaves, and that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully you followed along with me. I really hope you had fun, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye!